Man is by nature a political animal, destined to live in a state.
Ever wondered why your family dinners turn into heated debates about wealth inequality? Or why every election cycle feels like a battle between the rich and everyone else? Aristotle saw it coming 2,300 years ago. His Politics isn't some dusty academic text. It's a brutally honest analysis of why governments succeed, why they fail, and why humans can't seem to stop arguing about who should be in charge. Written in the 4th century BCE, this work reads like Aristotle spent years observing political train wrecks, successful societies, and everything in between, then decided to write the ultimate guide to not screwing up governance. Here's his radical opening move. Humans aren't just capable of politics, we're wired for it. We're political animals, zoon politican, meaning we don't just tolerate living together. We need it to become our best selves. This isn't about taxes and bureaucracy. Aristotle argues that without political community, you're not fully human. You're either an animal or a god. The state exists to help us achieve eudaimonia, human flourishing, the good life, not just to stop us from killing each other. This transforms politics from a necessary evil into humanity's highest calling. And if you think modern politics is chaotic, wait until you see Aristotle's classification of how governments collapse into dysfunction and his disturbingly accurate predictions about which societies survive. Aristotle traces political organization like an evolutionary biologist tracking species development, and his progression feels uncomfortably familiar. It starts with the household. Men and women unite for reproduction, obviously, and masters and slaves for economic survival. We'll deal with that problematic part later. Households cluster into villages for protection and trade, and villages eventually merge into the city-state, the polis. But here's where it gets interesting. Aristotle insists this isn't a random historical accident or a social contract people reluctantly agreed to. It's natural. Just as acorns naturally become oak trees, human communities naturally evolve toward complex political organization. Think about it. You can technically survive alone on a desert island, but you can't develop language, philosophy, justice, art, or any higher human capacity. The state provides the framework for everything that makes life worth living. Aristotle delivers one of history's greatest mic drops. Anyone who lives outside political community is either a beast or a god. Normal humans? We need the polis. The state doesn't exist merely to keep you alive. Any prison can do that. It exists to enable you to live well, to develop virtue, to exercise reason, to become fully human. This is why Aristotle sees the state as preceding the individual in importance, just as your whole body is more fundamental than your individual fingers. Radical individualism, in his view, misunderstands human nature entirely. We're not isolated atoms reluctantly cooperating. We're inherently communal beings who only flourish together. Keep this in mind. It completely reframes every political debate about individual rights versus collective good. Now we get to the framework that'll make you see every government differently. Aristotle asks two deceptively simple questions. Who rules? And who benefits? From these, he derives 6 constitutional types that map onto virtually every government in history. One person can rule, monarchy. A few can rule, aristocracy. Or many can rule, polity. So far, so obvious. But here's the twist. Each of these has an evil twin version where rulers serve themselves instead of the common good. Monarchy corrupts into tyranny, one person ruling for personal benefit. Aristocracy degenerates into oligarchy, the wealthy few exploiting everyone else. And polity collapses into democracy, in Aristotle's specific sense, where the poor majority redistributes wealth purely for their own advantage, ignoring justice. Wait, democracy is bad. Here's where Aristotle gets provocative. He doesn't use democracy the way we do. For him, it means mob rule by the poor, just as oligarchy means exploitation by the rich. Both are corruptions because they serve one class's interest rather than the community's good. What we'd call good democracy, Aristotle calls polity, constitutional government where the many rule for everyone's benefit. And here's his surprisingly practical conclusion. There's no single best constitution for all societies. A virtuous king is ideal. If you can find one, spoiler, you can't. What actually works best for most real cities? A mixed constitution, polity, that balances democratic and oligarchic elements, incorporates both rich and poor, and prevents any faction from dominating. This isn't philosophical idealism. It's pragmatic wisdom from someone who studied 158 different constitutions. Aristotle basically invented comparative politics, and his typology remains more useful than most modern political science frameworks. This section reveals why Aristotle understood your political moment better than most contemporary commentators. Every society contains oligarchs who believe wealth should determine political power and democrats who demand equal say for all citizens. Both sides are partially right and dangerously wrong. The oligarchs correctly recognize that people differ in talent, virtue, and contribution. Their mistake? Assuming wealth indicates these differences. Democrats rightly insist on fundamental human equality, but wrongly extend this to every political function. A brilliant surgeon and someone who barely graduated high school are equal in human dignity. But should they have equal authority over complex policy? Aristotle's answer: it depends what the policy concerns. True justice requires proportional equality, distributing political power according to contribution to the state's purpose. Since states exist to promote virtue and the good life, those contributing most to these goals deserve greater influence. But, and here's where Aristotle's realism shines, actual states consist of rich and poor classes with opposed interests, making this philosophical ideal nearly impossible. Revolutions erupt when one group feels systematically excluded or when constitutions too heavily favor one faction. The solution? A large, powerful middle class. Middle-income citizens possess neither the arrogance of extreme wealth nor the desperation of poverty, making them natural mediators who support moderation and stability. States with robust middle classes and balanced constitutions endure. Those polarized between rich and poor elites versus impoverished masses inevitably collapse into revolution or tyranny. Sound familiar? Aristotle's analysis of class conflict, inequality, and political instability could have been written yesterday. The specifics change, the dynamics remain eternal. Having analyzed what actually exists, Aristotle pivots to what could be, his vision of the best possible state. But don't expect utopian fantasy. He's designing for human nature as it is, not as we wish it were. The ideal state would be small. Citizens should recognize each other, with good geographic position, resource access, and people combining spiritedness with intelligence. Its citizens would be freed from manual labor, yes, by slaves. We told you there'd be problematic parts, to focus on politics, military service, religion, and philosophy. Not because Aristotle thought citizens were too good for work, but because he believed cultivating virtue requires leisure for education and contemplation. And here's what makes this section genuinely radical. The state's primary responsibility is education. Not defense, not economic management, education. Why? Because shared education creates the common values and character necessary for political unity. Without citizens formed by similar moral and intellectual training, the state dissolves into factional warfare. Aristotle proposes detailed curricula: reading, writing, gymnastics, music, drawing, designed to develop both practical wisdom and appreciation for beauty and excellence. Music particularly fascinates him for its power to shape character and emotion. But here's the crucial point. Education must be public, not private, because it serves the community's common purpose. You're not training your kids for their private success. You're forming citizens capable of pursuing justice and collective flourishing. This isn't about indoctrination. It's about creating people who can reason together about the good life, participate responsibly in self-governance, and achieve eudaimonia through virtuous activity. In an era of educational polarization and culture wars, Aristotle's insistence that political communities require shared moral formation feels either dangerously authoritarian or desperately necessary, probably both. Aristotle's economic analysis skewers both ancient communists and modern capitalists with equal precision. He demolishes Plato's proposal for common property, arguing it would create chaos. When everything belongs to everyone, nobody takes responsibility for anything. Private property motivates careful stewardship. But, and wealthy readers won't like this, Aristotle insists property should be private in ownership but common in use. You own your stuff, but you share generously, making resources effectively available to all. He distinguishes between natural wealth acquisition, getting what your household needs through farming, herding, limited trade, and unnatural money-making pursued endlessly for its own sake. And here's where he gets savage. Lending money at interest, usury, is most reasonably hated because it's the most unnatural form of wealth accumulation. Money should facilitate exchange, not breed more money. It's sterile by nature, so making money from money is perverse. Modern banking executives and credit card companies wouldn't survive 5 minutes debating Aristotle. His point isn't that we should return to subsistence farming. It's that economic activity should serve higher purposes, enabling virtue, political participation, and human flourishing. When wealth accumulation becomes the goal itself, it corrupts individuals and destabilizes societies. The state must ensure citizens have adequate property to live well without falling into poverty or excessive wealth, because both extremes undermine virtue and fuel the class conflicts that destroy political communities. Economic moderation isn't just nice, it's essential for survival. Aristotle saw how wealth inequality poisons politics, and his warnings echo louder every year. Here's the uncomfortable truth. You can't escape Aristotle. For 2,300 years, every political philosopher has either built on his foundation or defined themselves against it. His empirical method, studying actual governments to derive principles, pioneered comparative politics. His insights about constitutional balance, rule of law, middle-class importance, and revolutionary causes remain disturbingly accurate. Yes, his defenses of slavery and exclusion of women are morally repugnant. We've, finally, moved beyond those prejudices. But his core arguments? They're still fighting for space in your brain. His analysis of how different classes understand justice differently illuminates why your political opponents seem to live in different realities. They do, sort of. His warnings about extreme inequality destabilizing democracy explain our current moment with eerie precision. Medieval Christians, Renaissance Republicans, modern communitarians, virtue ethicists, everyone returns to Aristotelian themes because he asked the right questions. Who should rule? How should power be distributed? What makes communities flourish? What enables human excellence? Politics endures not because it's perfectly correct. It isn't. But because it forces you to think seriously about how humans can organize themselves to live together justly and well. Every generation must answer these questions anew, and Aristotle provides the framework for asking them properly. You might disagree with his conclusions, but you'll use his categories to articulate your disagreement. That's the mark of genuinely great philosophy. It becomes the language in which all subsequent conversation occurs. So whether you're arguing about healthcare policy, economic systems, or who deserves political power, you're having an argument Aristotle structured. He's been winning debates for millennia, even against people who've never read him. Maybe it's time you actually did.